This morning, Marie's going to step us through the change that they achieved within their laboratory and airports teams, which included 20% increase engagement scores, a 35% increase in confidence in the future of the council, alongside substantial improvements in the customer satisfaction and accreditation of those teams as well. So it was a very impressive submission, and we're very pleased to present them with the award. So on that note, I'll hand over to Marie to tell her story. So thank you, Marie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I don't know whether I'm shaking from nerves or from the aircon, so I'm going to go with the aircon and see how we go, okay? First of all, it's been a great pleasure for us to work with the Voice Project. I've had experience with employee surveys. Anybody who works in HR probably has over the years. And one of the things that attracted me to this survey was because it was just very user-friendly, easy to interpret. Our organisation, Tamworth Regional Council, we have over 550 employees. And the beauty of our organisation, though sometimes it can be a challenge, is we cover everything from roads, bridges, art galleries, libraries, sewerage. We have after-school daycare, we look after the elderly, we provide community care services. So it's a very broad remit that our organisation has. And in many cases, I think, a lot of times people don't really appreciate the diversity of working in local government. And that's one of the things that I'm actively trying to promote as well, that there's more to it than just roadworks and rubbish. There's lots of other career opportunities in local government. But as part of that challenge, that also means that we needed to get a survey that would actually be easy to understand by all of our employees. The lab and the airport, you're probably wondering why such a combination. I'll give you a little bit of background. One of it was, and as Peter says, it's down to the numbers. We wanted to make sure that we could get enough numbers in the team that we could report anonymously. But we also wanted to make sure that if we were combining smaller teams, they were teams that were coming from a similar background. And the lab and the airport, they're both highly, highly technical areas, but they also felt very isolated as a result of the work that they did. They felt that the organisation in general didn't really recognise them and didn't even know where they lived in a lot of cases because they weren't part of the main building. There's 17 staff in total between the two combined teams. They're, I suppose, quite a small team in terms of Tamworth Regional Council overall. But they also generate quite a large amount of revenue for the organisation, which is quite unique in local government. We tend not to be revenue generating. Our response rate in 2013 went up to 100% for those teams. So we had surveyed the year before, and this was our second time surveying. So they actually believed that it was something that, you know, their opinions were getting heard. As I said, they were both remotely located, and they formed part of what was called the Business and Events Directorate. And we like to call it in the organisation the Sexy Directorate, because what they do is usually they look after concerts, they look after our country music festival, they get involved in the more glamorous things. So that was the front of house. And then the poor lab and airport, they were the people that were processing soil samples and water testing, and the airport guys were making sure that the planes went in and out on time, that were carrying the country music artists or whoever was coming in, but nobody was actually recognising them. So that was part of the challenge for them. The key thing for the laboratory, so the challenges that we had there was they didn't see a career path. So Peter, you touched on learning and development there and the improvements. Well, that was one of the big ones for us, was the learning and development piece for the laboratory. And the other piece was safety. And part of that was actually an internal challenge in the team with one or two team members, but it had been allowed to drift for a long time. And that was something that when I got closely involved with them, we tackled it and we took it extremely seriously. And the feedback that we got from the team afterwards was that they really, really valued that, because it was having a very negative impact on all of the team. Because you can imagine, in a laboratory environment, if you have somebody who's a little bit volatile and who isn't treating the processes with the right amount of care, it's not just as simple as a test gets spoiled. Somebody could actually get injured. So you don't want somebody coming to work every day worried about their safety from a real physical, concern point of view. So that was one thing that we needed to tackle, and that was an internal issue. With the airport, the challenge that we had with them was back to what I said earlier, the organisation's understanding of their actual role and what it is that the guys did, because they tended to blend in with the Qantas baggage handlers and all those other people, and they even said to me, I don't think people even know that we work for Tamworth Regional Council. And I suppose the other bit as well was recognition of their technical skills, that they actually did have a very important role to play, and that safety was key in the operation of an airport. So they were the challenges that we had in those two teams. Now, I promised them that I'd do this, so I'll just see if yep. Okay, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but they sent me lots of slides to show off. They said, you've got to show people what we do. So I'm showing you the pictures, all right. But what I will do is, suppose these are just some key stats. So from the airport, as you can see, over 158,000 commercial passengers in 2013. So while we are a regional airport, we are one of the largest regional airports in New South Wales. And we also introduced passenger screening last year, which was a big deal for our airport. So it means that we can take in bigger planes should we choose to do so, and that once they're screened, once they hit Sydney Airport, then you don't have to go through the drama of being screened again. And we also have quite sophisticated equipment, which I have been shown, which means that if planes can't land in other smaller regional airports due to fog, etc., we have the landing equipment, which means they can do that in Tamworth. And that's a recognition of the foresight of the guys in the team, that they've pushed and pushed to have that equipment there. And it does help us in terms of our economic growth going forward. Okay, so that's the airport. What I will do is, while I'm showing those stats, is just briefly then tell you, well, what do we actually do in the airport to make a difference? It's not that sophisticated, and I sometimes get a bit embarrassed because I think it's so simple, but it was actually going out on site and meeting with them at the airport, not making them come into head office all the time. The ladies in the kiosk, so who sell the sandwiches and coffee, actually said to me one day, the one thing that's made a big difference to us is that after I had been there a few times and met with them, if I was traveling for business or even on holidays, I would always go up and say hello to them at the coffee shop, you know, if you're buying a bottle of water or whatever, or just waving. And they said that made a huge difference, because the amount of senior staff who go through the airport, as you can imagine, and never even say hello. And they said even that was a shift, that people recognized them. So yeah, I told you it was simple, but it makes a difference. The other bit was greater communication. So going out and talking to them and telling them why the changes were happening in the organization, why the management team was being restructured, what impact it was going to have on them. And in the airport in particular, they'd had a manager there for a very long period of time. He was almost part of the furniture, and then he was leaving, and there was a new management structure being put in place, and it wasn't very easy, the transition for them. And we acknowledged that. We could have handled it better. But the second year then, we made sure that we spent a lot more time out there with them, talking them through the changes and trying to understand the impacts that it had on them. I will acknowledge that there are still some difficulties in the airport. I'm here to be honest with you. There are still some things that we're trying to implement in terms of rostering, and again, trying to make the operations of the airport more efficient. But at the end of the day, the reason we can go and have that open dialogue with them now is because they know us on first name terms, myself, the other members of my team, and also the director of their particular directorate. So while some of the meetings may be a bit robust, at the end of the day, we still walk out and, you know, we can still work together. Then the laboratory. Yeah, okay. So I'll give you, that's kind of the main overview of the laboratory. In the lab, their key stat is that they conduct over 1,500 tests per month. So for a small team, and they basically do everything from soil sampling, water sampling, etc. They do a lot of the work for Tamworth Regional Council itself, but then they also do it for a lot of our neighbouring councils. And we're also trying to get a lot more private business in. So they are a key revenue generator for us. But unfortunately, they're tucked in the back of an industrial estate somewhere, and half the employees in the organisation wouldn't even know what that building was or who those people were. One of the things we did in that area, again, as I said, is went out and actually took the time to visit them and look at their operation. We tackled the safety issue in relation to that one particular staff member, and it was a very difficult period for the team, but it made a huge difference once we had that issue resolved. And I genuinely believe that no matter what other work we would have done around it, if we hadn't have tackled that issue, there still would have been a problem for us. But I think they saw that we were taking things seriously, and our mantra is, safety and health is important, but you've got to put, you've got to put your money on the table and say, okay, we're actually going to deliver on that, and we did. The other thing was the career progression. So we're not going to promote them all overnight. There can only be one lab manager. But what we did do is put a formal structure in place that his second in command actually got recognised for his technical ability, and when he would step up and cover for Anthony, the manager, when he was on leave. So we promoted him formally into the next level position. And that in itself showed the organisation that there was a structure, okay? And that they could see, well, that's a position that I could ultimately go for. And there were steps between the manager position and the lower levels. And to the point where we also trained Anthony, the manager, on best practice in people management. And last year at our regional finals in the state training awards, he got a highly commended award for frontline management. So that was a big deal for him, but also a big deal for us, because that was in the space of 12 months. So that made a huge difference. Sorry, I don't think the timer kicked in, so how am I doing?
That's right. Another couple of minutes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Peter. I suppose if I was to summarize, the passion and progress, as Peter touched out on, both increased by about 20% for us, which was huge in that particular area, given some of the challenges that we had. But the big thing for me was organisational objectives went from 50% in the previous year to 94% in the following year. So that was a massive jump for that team. And for them to actually understand the direction we're heading in, I'm sure many of you would feel that if you're working in HR or in your senior teams, you're sleeping and drinking the organisational objectives, because that's what you're trying to implement. That's the thing you're trying to get up and running. So you understand it and you get it, but trying to get everybody else to understand it and to follow you, I just find can be very challenging. So to see that these two small remote teams who you normally wouldn't associate with local government actually got it to the point where there was a massive leap in a year. I just thought that was, hey, maybe we are doing some things right. But they did it because of simple things. So that's the bit where you go the aha moment and go, well, actually they are the things that make the difference. They're highly technical, specialized people. They could be quite cynical about the organization, but yet within the space of 12 months, through small incremental steps, they suddenly said, yes, we actually see what you're trying to do, we believe what you say, and we're actually now telling you that it's making a difference to the way that we operate. And that's great that they're more engaged, but from a business perspective, it also means that they're more productive. And you can see that because they want to generate more revenue for the organisation. They want the councillors to see that they're a key part of the organisation and they're taking pride in what they do, but they're also knowing that we're taking pride in what they do. One of the things I'll be saying tomorrow at the presentation with Louise is, because I was thinking about this a bit, you look at all the happy surveys and it's all about making the employees happy and satisfied, and at the end of the day, it's not about them being happy or satisfied. It's about them being engaged, wanting to come to work every day, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but that it's going to be okay. I'll get through the day because I'll have people who've got my back. But the key for me is it's not always about saying yes. So when you sit down and you do your debrief after the survey and you go through the scores and they tell you all the things that are wrong or could be better, it's not about sitting down there and saying, yes, we'll fix that, yes, we'll change that. If it was that easy, you would have done it a long time ago. But it's always about being honest. You have to be honest with them and explain why you can't say yes and why it possibly may never change. And as an organisation, we're going to have to accept that those scores might not move as much as we'd like, but at least we've been honest and explained the reason why. So for me, with this team in particular, that was the key. Listening to them, being honest with them about the things we couldn't change, but certainly trying to change the things that we could. Okay, that's it from me. Yes, good question. It changed over the two surveys. So I'll be honest, again, as I have been this morning, the first year in the survey, we had a director in place who was relatively new to the organisation. And he was perhaps more focused on the sexy stuff. And hence the reason why we had some of the scores that we did in the first year round in the survey. But the second year, myself and the new director, and he's actively spent a lot more time, so we've had a change. He's actively spent a lot more time in those areas, A, because he needed to get to know the business, but B, because he just had a different style. So myself and John have basically spent a lot more time out there. I already had the relationship from the prior year going through the survey results, but the second year round partnering with him has made a big difference. Yeah, the unions are ever present in our change management process. But yes, we told them about the survey, so they were aware of what we were doing. But they were very hands-off once they knew that we were including everyone. And one of the key things for us was our outdoor workers, which is over half our workforce, wouldn't have access to computers. So they would do paper-based surveys. We would go out on site. And once we explained to the unions how we were going to gather the information from them and the adjustments that we were going to make, they were fine with it. We're working with the unions at the moment with some of those changes I mentioned in the airport with the rostering. And we do, yeah, as I said, they're robust conversations, but at the end of the day, everybody is, working together to try and get to the end. And I genuinely mean that. They're robust, but we're still on track. Yeah.